Good morning, everyone. We're going to wait for people to join us, so we're not going to start for a couple of minutes until people have started to join. Good morning, everyone. We're going to wait just a couple more minutes until people have finished joining. We're going to wait a couple of more minutes before we start, but in the meantime, if you'd like to introduce yourselves in the chat, then please go ahead. Right, we're just waiting for a few more people to join, and then we'll start. Please introduce yourselves in the chat. And during the session, if you want to ask any questions, please put them in the Q&A box or in the chat, but the Q&A box would be really helpful so I can see where they are all together. Right, perhaps we'll make a start now. I'll start with some introductions. I'm Vicky Goff, and I'm the lead person for modern foreign languages in the UK at the British Council, and I'm here with Annalisa. Would you like to introduce yourself, Annalisa?
Absolutely. Hello, everybody. My name's Annalisa Gordon. I'm involved in initial teacher training in a large university, and I'll be sharing some of the practicalities about how to get into teaching later.
So please, as I've said, use the chat to introduce yourselves to us and to other people in the session, and please use the Q&A box for any questions that you have to us. So we hope to finish at about 10 to 11 and we'll be able to answer any questions that you've got. So first of all, I'm going to talk a bit about languages and the British Council and languages. You may know that the British Council teaches English all over the world, but we're really keen that people in this country, particularly young people, learn other languages because it's really important for our country, really important to understanding other cultures, for growth, prosperity and security. So no matter how many people around the world speak English, we need to make sure that people in the UK learn other languages too. And we know from the annual language trends report, which the British Council carries out, that the more disadvantaged you are, the less likely you are to learn a language or to take it to a high level. And at the moment, only half the cohort, less than half the cohort at Key Stage 4, so upper secondary, are doing languages. So it will be really good to get that to a higher number. And that's one of the DFE's ambitions. And that's partly one of the reasons why they're hoping they're introducing bursaries and scholarships to encourage people into language teacher training. So, good quality language teaching is really critical for social mobility. As I've said earlier, our language trends report shows that the more disadvantaged you are, the less likely you are to take languages and less likely you are to take them onto a high level and to do A-levels and so on. And it's important for the future of the UK that we have more young people with language skills. At the moment, we're in danger of going into a downward spiral of less people doing languages at school, less people doing languages at university, and fewer language teachers. And we really need to reverse that. It's a really important thing because it's so important that in the UK we have more young people with language skills who are better equipped to work in a global economy and live in a global society. So I'm going to hand over to Annalisa, who's going to talk to you about getting into teaching languages.
Thank you, Vicky, and hello to everybody. I suppose just encourage you, I suppose I'm going to provide quite a lot of information over a number of slides now. If it's helpful, do please just take photos of any of the screens, because there'll be links and things that you can follow up. And obviously you'll be able to view some of the presentation again on Catch Up through the Language Show organisation. So as you can see on the screen, I'm Annalisa. I'm Professor of Education at St Mary's University, which is a smallish university, but with very large numbers of people training to be teachers in Southwest London in Twickenham. But I'm not here really in my capacity as a St Mary's person. I'm here as a trustee and former president of the Association for Language Learning. Because really what I want to do is inspire you, as you can see here on this. Sorry, Vicky, can you go back
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you. To really think of language teaching as a job, something that you might enjoy, something where you would use your skills, your knowledge about language, your knowledge about culture to shape the generation of future language teachers. As Vicky said, we're in danger of losing out on opportunities for our young people if we don't recruit enough language teachers. So I'm delighted that you're here as part of this session. So let's have a think now, if we go to the next slide, Vicky, just a couple of things about what language teachers are. What do they do? Obviously, they help young people to explore language. London, if you're in the London area, it's full of a huge number of languages going on in our schools, and making those connections between languages is so vital too. Obviously, we're looking at culture and communication, about self-expression, that growing of confidence that comes. Language teachers are well known as well for being very creative. I would argue that they're unique in so many ways. But also, if we move to the next slide, language teachers do need one another in this process. They need themselves to make connections with the wider world, keep their own language skills and knowledge about culture and events and so on up to date and fresh. They need to have a really good understanding about the history of language teaching, the research about language teaching that is very vibrant in the country at the moment. And obviously to have opportunities to share and to grow. And you're already making a good step in that direction merely by attending the language show here as we go. But I will also, at the end of the presentation today, be encouraging you to check out the Association for Language Learning too, which is the home for all language teachers in the country. So now let's look at specifically about different routes into teaching. There are lots of different routes into teaching, and this can be a little bit of a challenge, particularly for people who are perhaps less familiar with the UK sector, the English sector of routes into teaching. You can see on the screen there, the signpost shows you can train to be a teacher, usually at primary, but you can train as undergraduate, the UG. The more common route perhaps is the PGCE route. Sorry, Vicky, can we go back to that slide again?
Yeah.
I should say to everyone, Vicky's got a new computer, and so it's very sensitive to the touch. I need the one with the signpost, Vicky, please. There's obviously postgraduate PGCE routes into teaching as well. There are, which are largely university-led courses, obviously working very closely with schools. You're in schools and on placement for a large part of any PGCE course. But there are also school direct routes into teaching. There's also a Teach First, assessment only routes if you've already got considerable experience as a teacher. So my suggestion here around this page really is to make sure that you do your homework into teaching, the different routes that are there, to make sure you're making an informed choice about the route for you. So on this slide, you can see what the expectations there would be for September 2023. If you want to do the homework, the Get Into Teaching website there would be your very sensible first port of call. Once you're there, you search for courses. You can look under a huge range. They come up geographically. You can organise by type of training provider and so on. So again, this phase will feel a little frustrating, but it's such an important part of you making a decision about where you would want to train to teach. There are some entry requirements that apply to all applicants. So you would need to have a degree in line with the subject that you're planning to teach. Now, you could be a UK national, a British national who's doing or has done a languages degree at university here. Clearly, that's a very obvious degree in line with your subject. You could be somebody who is a native speaker of languages, so your degree may have been actually in something quite different. I remember one trainee teacher of languages at St Mary's some time ago who had a first degree from France in law, but then moved to the UK, decided to retrain as a teacher, and obviously the native speaker skills that that person had came into play. I suppose on this one slide as well, I would just make a little bit of a comment about the need for certain qualifications. They're set down by the Department for Education, who require not only a degree in line in some way or other with the subject you want to teach, but also GCSE. These are the exams we take at the age of 16 in England, but you need the equivalent thereof in English and mathematics. These qualifications apply to everybody, for language teachers, for teachers of science, for teachers of religious education, and so on. So there's a huge range there of different qualifications you will need to check out. Most, obviously, EU nationals will have qualifications in line with what's required there as well. But again, really checking out the information. If you find a university that you think looks like it might be the one for you and you've got concerns about your qualifications, you will be able to talk to their admissions tutor or to someone in their registry. There is also, as you can now see on this screen, a particular hotline, email address for qualification queries. These are particularly for people with overseas qualifications in different ways. It is a little bit more complex these days to apply as an EU national or an overseas applicant, but the Department for Education is working quite hard at the moment to ease some of that, particularly around things to do with visas and so on, which I'll come back to later. So how do you apply? This takes us to the next slide. How you apply, obviously you do your homework, as I've suggested, check out the available courses. You will find just one point to mention here in this regard. You will find that some initial teacher training providers specify that all applicants must have two languages. The most common languages being taught in our schools are French, Spanish, German, some Italian out there, obviously Arabic, Mandarin. There are a whole range of languages, but it is definitely worth checking that requirement. Doesn't mean you have to be native speaker level in both, no, far from it. But there are some universities, for example, that will insist on having two languages. I will come back to that because I think it's an advantage for almost everyone applying to be a languages teacher to be able to offer a main language and at least some of another language. But I'll share with you Department for Education approaches that will help to support you with that. You need to check the entry requirements and you need to go through a centralised process. You don't apply direct to a university or a school-based ITT provider. You apply through Get Into Teaching system, and there's an apply process, and if you're unsuccessful in the first round, you can obviously apply again. There's plenty of opportunities there. For those of you familiar with applying to university here in England, it's a very similar approach to the UCAS system. So you need to have a personal statement. You've got to be able to convince the person reading your application that you're motivated, committed, making an informed choice about teaching. And you do also need to provide some referees, 2 referees, and making sure that they're ready to respond and complete their reference for you will be a way of making sure that you speed your way through the process quite quickly. So that it's a centralised system, just to be really clear, centralised system. Get Into Teaching, the website, the Department for Education's website there will provide all the details, and the system itself is called Apply. So that should hopefully clarify a few things there. Obviously, there are some practical issues for you to consider. You may have a passion for languages. You may just be desperate to share about culture and things like that with pupils in schools in England. But obviously, you need to make sure that you're making an informed decision. And part of that will be making sure that you have the appropriate funding and background to be able to navigate a teacher training course. On that screen there, I'm not going to talk about them in detail. We're going to pick up on just 1 or 2 points here, but these are different options that are out there for you to explore. Make sure that you're really up to date with where you can draw down perhaps loans, or you can get grants or bursaries and so on as you go through. So one of the biggest disappointments for me is when someone has gone through this rather long process of applying to teach, made all the decision, starts the course, is enjoying their first school placement, and it really thinks that teaching is for them. and then finds they just haven't thought through the finance of it properly and need to stop their course while they go away and do another job. So I cannot stress more than this really about making sure that the funding side of it is in hand. Having said that, the next slide brings some really good news for us, because the Department for Education recognises that we are short of language teachers in this country. I mean, even that one statistic there on the screen, it's quite soul destroying in some ways, but the DFE's own target for last year of recruiting languages teachers was missed, and you can see quite considerably. So the good news is that the Department for Education is once again providing a tax-free bursary. It's like a training grant, I tend to think of it as, of £25,000 to anybody who meets the criteria, and that's pretty much everybody. If you have a good second-class degree or above, or equivalent, obviously from somewhere else in the world, and then you would be entitled to this bursary. So I'm going to hand over at this point back to Vicky, who will just explain a little bit more about how bursaries and also scholarships will be of interest to you.
All right, so as Annalisa said, because of this shortage in language teachers, the Department of Education has put out this initiative for people to start training in 2023 to try and develop more future modern languages teachers at secondary level, and a bursary of 25,000 will be available for you, not just for UK nationals. You don't need to have right to remain to do this. It's also available for overseas nationals. So applicants will be eligible if they have a first 2-1 or 2-2 or equivalent from overseas, and they don't need to be eligible for UK student finance. So that's one offer, and then there's another offer as well, which is teacher training scholarships. And the British Council runs this programme on behalf of the Department for Education. So you can apply to be a British Council teacher training scholar and get 27,000 as financial support during your training year. So this is separate from the bursary. You can't get both. You can get, everyone can get the bursary, but you will need to go through another interview, and then that gives you the chance to become a British Council scholar. And as well as the financial support, the 27,000, you also will get a range of other kinds of support that will really help you during your training year. So you will get free membership of the Association for Language Learning, which Annalisa is going to speak about in a minute. You will get webinars from expert speakers in the field of MFL in the UK. There'll be lots of training and networking opportunities run by bodies such as the Institut Français, the Goethe Institute, and the Spanish Embassy Education Department. You'll get invitations to the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Modern Foreign Languages. So you'll get invitations to their meetings at the House of Parliament, again with really key and interesting speakers. And you will get information on the British Council programmes that support modern foreign languages, but also support the international dimension. So you'll get training on how to become an international coordinator, which might be a really interesting addition to your CV when you start looking for jobs. So we hope that this scholarship will be something prestigious that you'll be able to add to your CV. So you'll be able to express interest in this from now, and I'm going to show you the email address to do that, the British Council email address on how to express interest. And applications will open in January for people to start training in September 23. Back to you,
That's great.
Annalisa.
Yes, thank you, Vicky. And the incentives there through financial support are obviously important for everybody wanting to train to be a teacher. We can have as much passion and commitment we have to young people and to languages, but if we can't support ourselves financially through training, then clearly that's a concern. So that's really good news for everyone interested in training to teach languages. There is also one other opportunity for you, and I would say this is a good news story as well. The Department for Education also funds some subject knowledge enhancement courses. Now, do you remember I said that it would be beneficial to have not only your main language for teaching, but also a second language for teaching? So a subject knowledge enhancement course could well be the kind of thing that you would get interested in or respond to really support you with developing perhaps a second language. You could also sign up for a subject knowledge enhancement course for your main language. If your degree is perhaps less related to Spanish, French, German, whatever it might be, or indeed, if it's some time ago that you did your degree and you feel that your language skills are a little bit rusty. So subject knowledge courses are available. The majority of them are online and you can manage them in your own time. And again, you would find these on the Department for Education website to find out. St Mary's, we offer them in French and Spanish, for example, online courses for subject knowledge enhancement. Now, there are a few things that you can't just sign up because you feel like it. You do have to have gone through the process, have been offered a place, a conditional place on a teacher training course somewhere. And one of the conditions of your offer has to be that you need to complete a subject knowledge enhancement course. So don't see this as a conditional offer that is bad news. For me, I would say everybody should really think hard about having the condition about a subject knowledge enhancement course, because as soon as you have that as a condition set, it entitles you then to free subject knowledge enhancement course. What more could we want than a free course? But actually it's even better than that, because the DFE's funding also allows a participation bursary. So you almost receive money to complete the subject enhancement course. So not only do you gain skills, but you're also financially recompensed for your time amongst it. The subject knowledge, there are obviously quite strict rules about that. And your participation is carefully monitored. Your progress on a subject knowledge enhancement course would be monitored as well. But it really is an ideal opportunity to prepare yourselves before you start your teacher training course in September. Now, I say that the before with added emphasis there, because if you are going to have a chance to take part in a longer subject knowledge enhancement course, the sooner you apply for your teacher training place, then clearly the better, because you need to have gone through that interview process, be offered your conditional place to then be able to sign up for your subject knowledge enhancement course. So there's a little bit of an imperative there to encourage you to apply as soon as possible, as you can do as well through that. So that's one aspect of it. The other thing, which I think is of particularly relevance to overseas applicants, and there are many overseas nationals who train to teachers, language teachers in the UK every year. But for the first time now, the Department for Education, the government, have indicated there will be some support available for overseas nationals who are coming to train. So an international relocation premium. The details aren't actually published yet, but I know that Vicky, for example, is attending a meeting in this coming week about that. So details will be emerging very soon now. And again, that may be an additional support for you as you're moving forward and considering language teaching. So let's go back to where we started. We're thinking about a job where you can use your knowledge of the subject that you enjoy, so your languages, every single day. Use that knowledge obviously to inspire children and young people in our schools and to help them to really broaden their horizons, think outside of the UK bubble and shape their thinking into the future. Now, I mentioned at the start that I'm a former president of the Association for Language Learning. I'm on the board of trustees now, and I just want to have the opportunity to share a little bit about the work of the association. It is the professional subject association for teachers of all languages, primary, secondary, across all sectors, school sectors as well. It's an independent organisation, as you can see there. It's run by teachers, for teachers. Everybody is a volunteer. The only thing that we need to keep things going is some membership subscription, to set up the online platforms, to run conferences, to run events and so on. And as Vicky said earlier, if you apply for and are successful in gaining one of the British Council scholarships, then your membership of the Association for Language Learning would be included as part of that. But what does ALL do? Let me just quickly show you there. Obviously, it represents interests of members, contributes to things like the All-Party Parliamentary Group that Vicky also mentioned. Probably for someone new into language teaching, things like the publications, the Languages Today magazine, the Language Learning Journal, which helps lots of our trainee teachers with their assignments, for example, will be there. And also a real highlight of each year is the Language World Conference, usually takes place in March, and that obviously is open to all members to sign up and be part of as well. Why would you want to join? Well, I would say it's quite simple. To be well informed, you need to keep up to date with your subject. This is the same for teachers of any subject really, but obviously ALL for language teachers. To be networked, to get to know other people, to share ideas, to be adaptable. Obviously, taking ownership of your own professional development along the way, that requires you to be proactive. And a little bit like the language show that you're obviously part of today, there's no doubt that we get motivated by hearing ideas, getting inspiration from other people along the way. So very similar reasons for wanting to join ALL. What you get for your membership, I suppose, is also important for me to share here. As I said, you get a Languages Today magazine. It comes out 4 times a year usually. There's a weekly newsletter with lots of links to the cultural embassies, the educational institutes and so on. You get access to the members area of the website. And so, for example, something in our members area is called Learning from the Classroom. And that's where practicing teachers are sharing very small examples of bits of research they've done in their classroom, ways they've improved their practice, ways they've really sought to try and inspire the next generation of young people. And that's open there for other people to see, reflect on, and perhaps integrate into their own practice too. We have a national network, so you can attend national conferences, but we also have sessions and events all around the country. So there's the geographical network for Association for Language Learning as well. And of course, there is the Language World Conference every year, as I already mentioned there. How do you join? Well, it's very easy. You can just register on the website. And if you're considering joining and becoming a languages teacher, there is a section on the website about how to become a languages teacher. So that may be a useful next point of call for you after this input too. Obviously, you can apply to join in usual ways by phone and so on as well. How much is it is often a question that we're asked. It's a cheap organisation, association to join, I would say. For trainee teachers or aspiring trainee teachers like you, membership is £27.50 a year. If you are a scholar through the British Council, then obviously that's covered as part of your scholarship. And I tend to think of it as being cheaper than one Starbucks coffee a month. Obviously, it could be cost or anything else. But in terms of the benefits you get for the amount of membership, there is nothing like the Association for Language Learning. And perhaps by way of conclusion, I could just share this with you. There's a Kenyan proverb, I think it is, that describes how sticks in a bundle that are tied together are stronger than a group of separate sticks. And I suppose the image I'm using here is that as language teachers, we're obviously individual experts in our field. We're working in our individual schools with different pupils. But when we come together in something like the Association for Language Learning, then we become stronger because we can share ideas, share good practice, and really work together to inspire those children and young people in schools. So as part of your journey to becoming a languages teacher, I really hope that you would also consider becoming a member of the Association for Language Learning. And back to you,
Annalisa. I've just put up on the screen now, if you're interested in the Language Teacher Training Scholarship, here's the contact details, the URL to have a look and learn a bit more about it, and also to express interest, become part of our newsletter, and then you'll hear when the application's open. And I've also put up my personal email if you'd like to ask more questions. We don't have any questions in the inbox yet, Annalisa, but I've got a couple of things I wanted to ask you. And the first one is about what kind of preparation, if people are thinking about applying now for 2023. You talked about research, what kind of routes you might want to choose. One thing that we always suggest to future scholars is to do some school visits, and I think Get Into Teaching recommends that as well. If you don't have contacts yourself, then I think Get Into Teaching can help you find schools in which you visit. I think it's quite good to visit a range of different kinds of schools to give you an idea about what being a language teacher is like, and see if it's really for you. Anything else you would recommend?
No, I would absolutely support you with that decision, and certainly at any of the open evenings we have at the university where I work, the admissions tutors are always stressing the importance of getting into school, being really sure that this is the job for you, that you enjoy being all day in a classroom with 30 young people who can be quite lively on occasions, and that you have obviously limited control over your time because you have to fit in with the lesson times and so on. So I think making that informed decision for people who perhaps didn't go to school in this country, I would say it's even more important because the systems are all so different. That's one of the privileges of it, really, is we get to know different systems. But anytime you can get in school, it is quite difficult to get into school. So as Vicky suggested, the Get Into Teaching website has a school experience program that they hopefully link you in with some schools. But if you know people who are teachers or can make an introduction for you into a school, then absolutely make sure you get into school. It would also be worth, I would suggest, checking out, if you just go online, if you look at something like Oak Academy, there will be recorded languages lessons there that you can have a look at and see, get a sense of what kinds of things are covered in a languages classroom. I'd also suggest that you look at the GCSE, the exam I mentioned that young people take at 16, the GCSE and A-level specifications. You can just Google that as well to just get an idea of what kind of topics are covered, the kind of vocabulary the children would be learning, the cultural information and so on. So there's an awful lot of background preparation you can do to help prepare yourself.
And can you say anything about the pros and cons of different training routes?
Well, there are, in a way, I suppose we could look at it that it's great to have so many different routes into teaching. It does make it quite complex in terms of discerning the right route. I think there are pros and cons of all of the different routes. Perhaps if I just do the pros of the different routes, that might be better. A PGCE course, so a university led course, postgraduate certificate, obviously you would be linked on there to a university context, access to their entire library, all the resources, the full infrastructure that goes with the university, so the student wellbeing services, the activities, the sports facilities, all those usual things that you would get as part of a university experience. And then I suppose within that as well, through that university experience, you then have some school placements. Everyone would have 2 school placements as part of their training, and you would work with a mentor in schools at that time. So in some ways, the school-based part of it is quite similar to the school direct route into teaching as well. The school direct, you would apply directly to the school-based ITT provider. They will coordinate your training, which may include input from the university, and this is where it gets slightly confusing, so which is why it's so important to check out the different routes. People tend to think of them as quite different. I actually think they're more similar than most people anticipate. The one advantage perhaps of the school direct route would be that you could check in advance which school placements are perhaps linked to that one provider, so you get a bit more of a geographical sense of where you might be. But then on the other hand, most university providers will also be trying to find your school placements as close to where you live as possible. For languages, that can sometimes be quite difficult. I have to stress that, because you could have the most perfect school, you think, at the end of your road where you live, and it would just be very convenient to go up there on placement. And then of course you find that the languages taught in that school are Spanish and Mandarin, but you're a French specialist with some German, in which case obviously that school would not be appropriate, and the provider will need to find somewhere else for you.
Yeah, that's brilliant. One other thing, you talked earlier about recommending that people have 2 languages, and I think that's partly because it's difficult to get, my understanding is it's difficult to get a school that can give you enough of a timetable with one language. You become much more marketable when you have 2, possibility of 2 or even more languages. You become more marketable to schools. Yeah. Is that what you would say?
No, absolutely. I would agree with you there, Vicky. I mean, we want people who have good subject knowledge for teaching, but you could have your main language that you're able to teach right up to A-level. You've got the language skills, the cultural background knowledge and so on to be able to teach at that level. But anything that you can offer as a second language, it could even be just to year 7 or year 8 pupils, so the 11 to 13-year-old, just in Key Stage 3 even maybe, a second language, to have a little bit more flexibility there. It will have several advantages. It makes you, as Vicky suggested, much more marketable when you come to applying for jobs. But actually, I would also say it gives you more choice when you're coming to apply for jobs. So in this country, you apply direct to a school that's advertising for a vacancy. And I know that's different in some countries in Europe, but you apply yourself to a school. So if you know you want to teach in a particular type of school, the more languages you can offer, obviously, the better. you wouldn't want to pretend that you're amazing at Mandarin if you're not, for example, but at the same time, even being able to teach some of it at beginner level would be an advantage. And of course, you will be able to continue to develop the skills in that language over time. We've got trainee teachers who perhaps came in as a Spanish specialist with a little bit of French, and then over time in their teaching career, they've got better at French. They've spent more time going to France, taking children on trips to France, and suddenly, you know, their Spanish and French are becoming much more equal in terms of what they're delivering. So it's a great opportunity for learning for us as teachers as well within that setup.
And I mean, I think the other thing is that if you have a home or heritage language as well, that might be a really interesting selling point to the school, because you could set up a club, maybe try to introduce it into the curriculum even. The British Council with Qatar Foundation International is working to offer schools grants to bring Arabic into the curriculum. And a lot of schools are interested in supporting their home and heritage language students to be able to get some kind of qualifications and recognition in those languages as well. So that might be a really good asset for you too.
Definitely, definitely. And, you know, there are lots of opportunities. There's always opportunities for extracurricular activities in school. And I know many, I remember one trainee teacher in particular, she was from Poland, and she ran a little Polish club at lunchtime. The enthusiasm that engendered amongst the pupils in the school. So it wasn't a language on the curriculum as such in her school, but she was able to offer it so much more. I can see it within the Q&A box that there's a couple of questions there. One of them is about a DBS check. Now, for anyone who doesn't know what a DBS check is, it stands for Disclosure and Barring Service. Obviously, we have huge commitment to safeguarding and well-being of children in schools. And so every trainee teacher, when they embark on a teacher training course, will have to have a criminal record check, a DBS check. Now, it is worth mentioning that some schools will require that for you even to just go in and do some observation. So you must check that in advance of going to school. The school will tell you for sure. Some schools don't require it, because if you are visiting the school and you're a guest and you're being looked after by a teacher all day, you're just there with the teacher, you're not left on your own anyway, you don't wander around the school on your own, then some schools will allow you to visit on an occasional basis without the DBS check. But again, that is worth checking. Everyone for teacher training courses, it's a requirement. We have to make sure that, for example, at St Mary's, all 800 or so trainee teachers have all got a current DBS check. There's also someone in the chat who's asking about QTS recognition. So QTS is Qualified Teacher Status Recognition from the DFE, perhaps for someone who's got experience of teaching abroad, but not direct experience yet of teaching in England. And again, the Get Into Teaching website that I shared earlier will have guidance on that. It can be a little bit complicated because obviously if you're going for an interview for a job, you're a qualified teacher, let's say from Spain, but the other candidates at the job are qualified teachers who have worked through and have recently trained here in the UK, so know the current curriculum, the current exam syllabus and so on. It may be a little bit more tricky for an overseas national to get a job in that context, but there are lots of opportunities provided through the DFE to upskill, ready to be able to teach here.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you very much, Annalisa. So we've just got a few minutes left. So please ask any last minute questions, and then perhaps I'll say a few things and then ask you to say a few closing things. So what I wanted to say is that for people who are interested in language teacher training scholarships, please get in touch with the links that I mentioned earlier, and we can send you the information about those. And also, if you do become a languages teacher, please keep the British Council on your radar as you become a teacher, because we can offer you lots of interesting opportunities to make connections for you and your pupils overseas. So I think it's really interesting as a language teacher to be able to take young people to that country to ignite their passion in languages in the way that you might have had done when you went on that first trip overseas. And it can be very motivating to do international projects with pupils. It's a chance for you to use your connections that you might have in France or Germany or Spain or whatever. And it can be really inspiring. And you will get the International School Award accreditation for your school and so on. So please keep us on your radar in your journey through language teaching. Annalisa, was there things that you wanted to say?
No, I would just, my one comment would be that when someone's applying for teacher training, it can feel very overwhelming. There are all these different routes into teaching. You can find different kinds of teacher training providers in different places and so on. And it can feel a little bit overwhelming, but just take each step at a time. Really explore the Get Into Teaching website. If that doesn't give you the answer you want, I would just encourage you to check out your very local university or school-based provider. You know, anybody would be welcome, for example, to come to an open evening at St Mary's University, regardless of whether you actually wanted to train at St Mary's or not. But the same information, the opportunity to ask questions, to explore in much more depth than we can do in an online format as we have here. So really drawing on all the information that's out there, just emailing admissions tutors if you're in any doubt about things. I take my hat off to anybody who navigates. I always start the session with the new cohort every year just by saying, you know, well done for getting onto a course, because I think it can feel a little bit overwhelming. So don't be put off by that. Really go for it. Talk to people who are out there, visit places, get to know schools. It is the best job in the world. There is nothing better than being with a group of young people who suddenly find themselves saying things in a foreign language that they just didn't know that they actually had in their head. And that moment, particularly on visits abroad or in cultural exchanges with schools, is just such an inspiring feeling. So I would encourage you to go for it.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Annalisa. So we've given you quite a lot of information in this session, which if you weren't able to take photos of, you will be able to re-watch the session. So you just, I think it'll be up in the next 3 or 4 hours. You'll just click back on the session. You'll be able to watch the recording. So really good luck on your journey into teaching. Keep the British Council and the Association for Language Learning in your mind. And as Annalisa was saying, the Get Into Teaching website is really good, and they can give you an advisor who can help you with your journey. So good luck, and I hope to meet you in the future. Thanks very much, everyone.
Bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.